Less than compelling are the words that Robert Lloyd, television critic for the LA Times, has used to describe the Rings of Power, which is somewhat, disconcerting, but also something that we kind of already knew leading into this. He also says that it's occasionally exciting, sometimes sort of boring, visibly expensive, fitfully inspired, with a few charismatic performances, and all in all is watchable, though predictable even in the most suspenseful parts, which is something that I kind of knew it was going to be. And while we, of course, are still waiting for the first episodes to hit this weekend, it does paint a sort of dreary picture of what is definitely coming down the pipeline. I'm Tim Anderson, aka Renfell, the Bearded Dwarven Princess. Welcome back to another Rings of Power rant video as we dive into one of the first reviews that's coming out now that the embargo is down and the show is just around the corner. I am, of course, going to be reviewing these episodes on my own here on my YouTube channel. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow along for more as we dive into this and other Rings of Power fun. It's going to be fun, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, let's go dive into this article here. Before we get going, don't forget that this channel is completely supported by folks like you. Thanks to all of you who are supporting here on YouTube as members of the Adventurers Guild, as well as over on Patreon. And all of those of you who are here doing super chats and super stickers and super thanks and all the things on videos like this and during our live streams, thanks to everybody for keeping this channel alive and allowing me to pursue a full-time career on YouTube. So this review by Robert Lloyd, obviously I kind of cherry picked a couple of, of words out of here to start off the video with, but we do have to go through the whole entirety of this. And I will say that going into this, his review is that it's not exactly the disaster that many predicted it would be, but it's also not that good. And if I had to make a guesstimate, which I think I've said this before in many of my videos, I kind of estimated that this was going to be something that my wife would really enjoy because she's never read the books. She's seen the films many, many, many times, loves the extended editions of Peter Jackson's films, loves the Hobbit films. The Desolation of Smaug is one of her favorite films of all time. I cringe a little bit at some of the stuff from the Hobbit films. She does not. The Wheel of Time show from Amazon was really, really, really bad from my perspective because I went into it thinking that I wasn't a book purist and realizing at the end of it that I'm not really a book purist, but I do want my adaptations to stay true to the story and not just make shit up, like giving Perrin a wife and completely changing the arc of that character. And that's one of my greatest fears with Rings of Power is that they are dealing with an entire cast to some degree that is invented characters. There are very few characters from the books themselves that show up in the Rings of Power. We of course have characters like Elrond and Galadriel and Gil-galad, but they appear to be some of the very few that are here in the show that actually come from the books. But I have a feeling that my wife, example, loved the Wheel of Time show, despite the fact that I didn't like it because she's never read the books. She's also never read these books. And based on what I'm reading here from this review, I have a feeling she's going to like this, but yeah, I'm not, which I knew I kind of wasn't, but I was still trying to hold out hope. It says here, he says, I've seen the first 6 of the 8 episodes, and he says it's neither a disaster nor a triumph, merely television of a visibly expensive, fitfully inspired sort. That doesn't sell me on this being the epic that they claimed it to be. We had the showrunners a few weeks back trying to say that their show was aiming to be the timeless sort of classic, like Tolkien's books were, that would go down in history as like the next epic telling of the Lord of the Rings in Middle Earth, and it doesn't sound like it is. Now, if you look at Peter Jackson's films, they won so many Oscars, and they are beloved around the world, even though they have flaws. Even though they are flawed, Mr. Legolas sliding down Helm's Deep stairs, shooting arrows and single-handedly killing an Oliphant. Even though there are flaws to the Peter Jackson films, they are beloved around the world. I'm not seeing something that is beloved in this review. But again, reviews are opinions. Opinions vary. We're all going to have different opinions about the show. This is just one person's opinion that I'm reading through for this video. He says it looks good. Has a few charismatic performances that sell the characters, and all in all is watchable if something less than compelling, predictable even in the suspenseful parts, occasionally exciting, and sometimes sort of boring. Action scenes, which keep the movies lively, do get your attention here, but they're relatively spread out, perhaps because they're expensive and the season is long. Some might find it disqualifying, but I don't care how much the series departs from the source material, which is sketchy at best. Ooh. That doesn't sound good. Taking place a long time before Frodo set off for Mount Doom, and it's largely based on the novel's appendices. We already knew that. It says the male elves don't all have long hair as they do in the books and the movies. He says that's not something that even crossed my mind. And although many enjoy digging into the minutiae of Tolkien's cosmological, historical, and anthropological appendices, what matters is whether the series tells a good story. I will agree with that. I do agree with that. Or stories, since there are several, whose intercutting does take a little bit of power out of the narrative. My verdict on that point is here and there it does. Now and again. Some storylines work better than others. He says, at the same time, the allure of Peter Jackson's 6 films were not just in the narrative, but the production itself, the unprecedented effort put into bringing a fantasy world to intricately rendered life, whether through special effects or remarkable craftsmanship. As do the Lord of the Rings film, The Rings of Power functions as a kind of imaginary travelogue, carrying the viewer through various settings and locations like the Atlantis-esque island of Numenor. And he says, and in this respect, Rings of Power is an enjoyable ride. Now, this is what he keeps referring to. Visually, it looks very good. It takes you to many cool places. The action scenes look good. The storyline is meh. The character dialogue, meh. The writing, meh. Not a disaster, but also less than compelling. Um, so the review itself goes through more of basically the plot of everything. I love the way he describes Arondir as a sort of elf sheriff. Oh my god. Ambitious mastersmith Celebrimbor, who dreams of a giant forge with a flame as hot as a dragon's tongue and as pure as starlight. And in order to get the work done by spring, which feels arbitrary, Elrond goes on to enlist the help of the dwarves, only to find his old friend Prince Durin miffed that it's taken 20 years for him to look in on him and meet his wife. Oh my god. Oh my goodness. My goodness. So there are maps here. The tropes are familiar. Taste of adventure. A young Harfoot called Nori Brandywood is more or less the Bilbo or Frodo type, which is a small person fate has chosen for big things. There's the forbidden love between an elf and a human. And, oh my god. Oh god. Halbrand, whom Galadriel meets shipwrecked in the middle of the Sundering Seas, is like Aragorn in his ranger wear, a monarch in disguise. As soon as he says, "My people have no king," you 100% know that he's it. Oh, oh my god. So they have the broken king again? Oh my god. Oh my god. All right, so hang on. He says the Rings of Power is going to have to attract not only fans but people who have never read the books or seen the movies. It needs to be intelligible. It has to be intelligible to the less informed, which means smoothing out the action, cutting extraneous details, and keeping relationships between characters and kingdoms at least a little obvious and easy to read. Showrunners J.D. Payne and Patrick Ray have done this. Um, he says the thing about the intellectual property is that it is property controlled by whoever paid for it last. If they want to rip down a nice old house and put up a McMansion, nobody can stop them as much as the neighborhood might protest. That, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly true. And at the end of the day, that's what we're going to be getting from this show, from what it sounds like based on this review. A McMansion of sorts, a um, generic fantasy story with the label Tolkien slapped on top of it as if that somehow makes it as good at or as worthy of the name as other things that have been done in the past. I don't know. Again, I'm still waiting to see it with my wife and see what she says. I will, of course, be reviewing here, so don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow along. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any other reviews you might have found. Drop those down in the links. Drop those kind of in the comments below so that I can go read those and read other reviews that critics are doing. It's going to be a crazy weekend this weekend as we review the show, so hopefully you'll stick around for that. Again, thanks to all of our supporters here on YouTube and over at Patreon. Those of you who are dropping super thanks on these videos, as well as tuning in, doing live streams, and doing super chats and stickers and keeping this channel going. Hopefully, we'll see you over on Patreon, in our Discord, and beyond. And until next time, happy viewing, and I look forward to talking about the show with everybody this weekend as we get into the very first of the episodes around the Rings of Power. Cheers, everybody.